What's next for India from the lens of Roopa?
India cannot hope to become a developed country unless we increase the participation of women in the labor force in India. Many of them do not speak English.
Correct.
And yet I think they are driving a new wave of entrepreneurship in India. All of us will always face setbacks in life. Nobody will get everything that they want. I remember listening for hours on end to the BBC radio just to improve my vocabulary, just to improve my accent, just to improve my speaking capabilities. Good leaders deliver results, but great leaders can really build an institution. Luck has a lot to do with everything. Ask yourself the question, who am I without my job? And that will really help you understand what are your values, what you really enjoy. Rule number 1, humility.
Do you believe in destiny?
That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that. And I think...
Hello and welcome to the PVT Show podcast. I am your host, Poonam Vijay Thakkar. On this show, I bring to you conversations with leading authors and top leaders who energize the mind, challenge the norms, and awaken a purpose. It's all about conscious growth with one powerful book and one powerful story at a time.
They say power doesn't come from position, it comes from the courage to choose differently. And today I sat down with a woman who's done just that at every turn in her life and career. She didn't inherit legacy, she built it by transforming CRISIL into a global force, by backing India's next $500 million, by shaping boardrooms with empathy and edge. In India, only 5% of listed companies are led by women leaders, and just 1/3 of them have reached the top through professional merit, not family ownership. Roopa Kudva is one of them. But beyond every role, it's her mind that leaves a mark, sharp, grounded, and deeply human. This isn't just another leadership story. This is a blueprint for legacy. In our special Women in Transformation series, I welcome you all to meet Roopa Kudva, unfiltered, only on the PVT Show podcast, in a different avatar and in a different way. Hi Roopa, welcome to the PVT Show podcast.
Thank you so much, Poonam. I am really looking forward to this conversation. I've watched many of your episodes of the show, and I'm so struck by the energy and enthusiasm you bring to every chat. So let's dive in.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel so honored. In fact, I am absolutely honored to be having you on the show today.
My pleasure entirely.
Thank you so much. I think because we did the cheers part, now we have to
take a sip
and dive deep into a conversation which primarily is going to be focused on energizing everyone's mind. That's the whole concept of our show. Roopa, I want to begin by saying something to you. And I thought that this should be not parked for the introduction, but this should be said to you when you're in front of me. We all have looked up to you as a leader woman. I think everybody who has grown in their career in the early 2000s would know you as a leader woman in India. And this credit goes to somebody who has lived a dream of many women. And that's what gives me the honor of having this conversation with you today.
Thank you so much. You're very generous. But I must say that I always think that I am singularly fortunate because I entered the workforce around the time that the Indian economy opened up and liberalization happened. So people like me and many others at the same time have benefited tremendously from the opportunities it created. So the 2 decades after that saw a spurt in the economy, saw the country opening up. And in many ways, I belong to a generation which I think was in the right place at the right time. So I feel very fortunate and very blessed.
Okay, let me say very modest also. Roopa, this conversation is going to uncover something which is going to possibly make you a little uncomfortable. So I am giving the heads up right now. I was telling my team when we did the research that you have appeared and done thousands and umpteen interviews on the leading business channels all your life. What is it that we can do different for you and for our viewers? And that's how we started thinking. A typical journalist or a business channel would sit with you and ask you, okay, I'm doing this interview because ABC acquisition happened, this number game achieved, this number done. And then the last question that everyone would have to you would be, okay, Roopa, what's next? That is exactly I am not planning to do today.
Sounds good. And, I think this has the potential to be a really different conversation because I'm no longer CEO of anything. I'm no longer head of any organization. I am, as I say in my own words, footloose and fancy free. So we can take this in any direction you want.
Thank you so much for supporting me in this endeavor. So let us begin by a very rudimentary question. You might find it to be a little surprising, but beyond the titles and boardrooms, who is Roopa?
Well, if I look at the core of who I really am, I think like all of us, we at our essence are people who are shaped by our family, by the environment we grew up in and the times we grew up in. So if I look at it from that lens, I spent my entire childhood and all my life until college growing up in the small towns of Assam and what is now Meghalaya. It was a small town existence, simple existence, very much brought up in the midst of nature. On a typical holiday, for example, we would go out in the woods to play, and nobody worried about us. I think folks in the family knew that when the children get hungry, they'll come home.
Correct.
And we had no exposure to the business world at all, very little exposure to city life itself. But it was a great childhood in many ways, which I think had a profound influence on me because I had the privilege of going to some excellent schools in Northeast India. I grew up in a society in Meghalaya, for example, which was matrilineal, which meant that women occupied a very important place, not just in the family, but also in society and also in business. If you've been to Shillong, you will see that the entire Bada Bazaar is run by women. So that was an important influence. I grew up, my father was in the government services, so I came into close contact with several women bureaucrats. And my own mother, who was a homemaker during my early childhood, then studied and became a school teacher and later a school administrator. And I immediately noticed how people viewed working women differently. And I mean that in a positive sense. Mm-hmm. So I think all these, without being explicit, the environment and the surroundings were having an influence on me, as indeed they would on any child. I also remember once just overhearing a conversation between my mother and father where my mother said it's very important for women to be financially independent. Mm-hmm. No one said that to me, but I just overheard that and it stuck with me. And at that time, of course, the Prime Minister of the country was a woman, a major influence at that point in time. So I think all these were early childhood influences which shaped who I have become and who I am today. It was rooted in simplicity. It was rooted in the basic, simple pleasures of life. It was rooted in what I may call a quiet ambition, the seeds of which were sown now when I look back when I was pretty young.
That's exactly where I wanted you to reflect back. That little girl in the foothold and around the hills of beautiful Northeast. Did you ever think that you would be sitting in the top boss's job somewhere in a big city like Bombay? Were you ambitious is what I'm trying to understand?
I think I was ambitious in the sense that I knew that I wanted to work. I knew that I wanted to be financially independent. But beyond that, frankly, I didn't have too much of a clue. I decided after college to apply to the IIMs because I heard a cousin of mine in Mumbai talking about the fact that they are amongst the best institutes in the country, which is why I put in my application. And I ended up at IIM Ahmedabad, which really exposed me to a completely different world. It exposed me to a very different kind of peer group. And I think it completely changed the trajectory of my life.
How do you see the difference between a child growing up in small towns, small cities, and now that you have seen how it happens in big cities? What is the difference that you see clearly?
I think it was different in my time and different today. Let's talk about today first, and I'll go back to what it was like when I was growing up. I think today, outside the metros, you see young people who are hungry. They have aspirations, they have ambitions, they have drive. During my time as a startup investor in impact investing, I was thrilled to see the entirely new wave of entrepreneurs who are coming in. And they're coming not just from the IITs or from the metros, they are coming from what we used to refer to as tier 2, tier 3 cities, and the lesser known colleges and institutes. Many of them do not speak English.
Correct.
And yet I think they are driving a new wave of entrepreneurship in India. So I think across the board, and it's not just in entrepreneurship, you look at sports, you look at every other field, you are seeing small town India coming into its own today. Even as far as consumption is concerned, starting with not just the basic, but even luxury goods, cars, for example. So if you look at luxury car sales outside the metros, the numbers are quite insightful and quite revealing. So I think the action today outside the metros in India is very energetic. It's very powerful. It's very inspiring. When I was growing up, I think just because technology was at a very different stage, we didn't have access to the kind of information at the tip of our fingers that we have today. The world was different. And I always remember growing up with the feeling that somehow my exposure, because I grew up in a small town, was not as great as it would have been had I grown up in a metro. And when I looked at my cousins, most of whom were in Bombay, the kind of environment and exposure they were having. And so I did little things. For example, I remember listening for hours on end to the BBC radio just to improve my vocabulary, just to improve my accent, just to improve my speaking capabilities. And that's how, and also to become more aware of what's happening in the world beyond me. So I think these are little things that one did at that point in time to equip oneself. And none of this was done in a very purposeful manner.
Yeah.
I think, it's just something that there were inner forces that drive you to do some of these things. But that is one thing I definitely remember I did with a lot of intentionality, because I felt that if I wanted to do something in life, I have to broaden my knowledge. I have to be able to communicate well.
Yeah.
And those days we didn't have classes for, speech training and all of that. So this was my way of teaching myself.
How wonderful is that? I can totally relate to this and these are the instincts of a leader. Somebody who's wanting to do something. I mean, most of the times we would not know what we are going to do, as you said, but then the only kida of doing, that is a bug, which is there, an instinctive bug of leaders, I would say. So this explains a lot. I want you to reflect back on how the family environment was. As you said that mom was working. The environment definitely shapes future, for sure. But then if you were to tell people, this is the environment which was more conducive for me and I didn't have restrictions. And B, there is another environment where you still feel in tier 2, tier 3, there are restrictions. So from your leadership, the gems that can go out to people on whether it is conducive or it is not conducive, how one should think and conduct. Is there a belief system that one can develop?
I can speak about myself, and I think I grew up in a highly privileged environment. All of us, a lot of us grew up saying, oh, we come from a very middle-class background. And if you had spoken to me 20 years ago, that's what I would probably have said. But the reality is, in the larger context of India, I came from a highly privileged background. My mother was, as I explained, a school teacher and later became a school administrator. My father was a bureaucrat. So we grew up in a very nice environment. We had, I went to excellent schools. I ended my schooling in Kendriya Vidyalaya, where my peers were all kids whose parents were from all over the country.
Right.
They were from the armed forces, they were from the central government, they were from the state government. So a very diverse group of people, which I think increased my exposure, increased my comfort with diversity. We grew up in an environment where there were books in the house, where reading was encouraged, where no one explicitly said that we expect high academic standards or high academic performance. But I think you grow up in a peer group where there's a natural orientation towards learning, where there is curiosity that is sparked just by the kind of parents you have and the kind of family you grew up in. So I think I grew up with every possible advantage. And I don't want to make it sound like growing up in a small town was in any way disadvantageous as far as I was concerned. On the contrary, I think it made me a very grounded person. I think it made me have the ability to keep things simple, just have a very simple approach to life and a very simple approach to really the way I think about the world and my role and all of that. So when I say small town upbringing, I do not think in any way that I was disadvantaged because of it. That may not be so for others,
Right.
To your wider question. That may not be so for others, but certainly for me, it was not the case.
When did you come to Mumbai? And how did the shift happen?
I actually, this is really interesting because I actually came to Mumbai to do my graduation.
Okay.
And I lived here for 1 year. And I found it extremely difficult to adjust to big city life. And so after doing the first year of my graduation, I said, this is not for me. And I decided to go back to Assam.
What was
I-
difficult?
I think, first of all, I was not... It's not that I didn't have exposure to big city life. I just found the whole rhythm, the pace, the culture very, very alien compared to the environment I had grown up in, which I described. And I found it hard to adjust. I was living in a hostel, and I just... it was all too new. It was all overwhelming for me. I think had I been a little older, even 1 or 2 years older, I probably would have been able to adjust much better. And so at the end of 1 year, I said, this place is not for me. And to their credit, my parents just said, okay, if you're not happy, come back. They didn't say, oh, you're going to lose a year. They didn't say any of that. And I came back to Guwahati and I started my college all over again, my graduation all over again. And it was an interesting story because once I graduated and then applied for the IIMs, the first time I applied, I got admission into IIM Ahmedabad. But because of the anti-foreigner students' agitation in Assam at that point in time, my graduation exams were not over. Okay. And so I didn't have a mark sheet to give to IIM. And so IIM said, you cannot join. So I had to then, there was no provision to defer admissions at that point in time. So I had to take the CAT all over again the next year. And then luckily, fortunately, I got in. So reclear it. So in the interim, I actually was a school teacher. I was teaching nursery kids. So, when people ask me, what would you have done had you not got into finance? I said, who knows? I'd probably have been a school teacher.
Yeah. How beautiful is this? And then you got through and then
that's how I came to Bombay. So your question is, after I graduated, my first job was with IDBI. At that point in time, it was a development bank.
Right.
And initially, we all had to join in what was then Bombay. And we had the initial stint of our training there, and after which I got posted to Calcutta. And then, of course, for the last several decades, I've been here and worked here.
Right, right. How was the family culture? How did you start a family? What is that side which is not much known?
Well, I don't have children, if that's your question. So I got married after I graduated from IIM the very same year. And my husband is also from IIM Ahmedabad.
Okay.
And so we were in the same class, and he's also had a career in financial services. And we've been pretty much lived all across the country. So we've lived and worked in Calcutta, in Delhi, in Mumbai, in Bangalore. I've spent some time outside of India working with Standard & Poor's in Europe for a few years. And I think, I just think the general environment outside of work has been filled again with simple things, spending time with friends, traveling a bit, reading a lot. So that's really what keeps us occupied when we are not busy. My husband has a wider range of interests than I do. I pretty much focus on doing a few things. Like I enjoy spending time with friends. I enjoy reading a lot. I enjoy things like puzzles and crosswords and things like that. So that's what keeps me. I enjoy going for very long walks. So that's what I do when I'm not working.
This also explains that when I complimented you for your health and how good you look. Wonderful, Roopa. I want you to now reflect back when you joined as a senior analyst. You joined as an analyst, CRISIL? How did CRISIL happen? What is that story?
That's again one of those things which was an accident. So as I explained, I was working with IDBI after I graduated from IIM Ahmedabad. It was a fantastic place to be in, to kick off my career, because it really taught me how to evaluate companies. I was in project finance. We were making loans for large industrial projects. It gave me a very thorough grounding in evaluating projects, in understanding companies. There were several site visits and factory visits that one had to make in the course of one's job, which was very educational and very enjoyable as well. And at that point in time, my husband moved from Mumbai, who was a banker. He moved from Mumbai to Bangalore. And so I went to IDBI and I said, hey, can I get a transfer? And they had already moved me once before when my husband had moved. And so they said, we'll try, but, no assurances. And as this was going on, I was reading the Business World magazine, and I saw the interview of Pradeep Shah, who was the first CEO of CRISIL.
Right.
And in that interview, of course, he was very dynamic, he was visionary. And in the interview itself, I think what he was trying to build came across as very inspirational. But one thing caught my attention where he said, we are planning to open an office in Bangalore. And I said, aha, that's where I want to be.
You read this in that article? In
that article.
Okay.
And I had gone to Worli for interbank meeting. And I remember when that meeting got over, I realized that the CRISIL office was not too far away.
Okay.
So I walked down from my meeting to the CRISIL office. I had no appointment. And I walked up to the reception and I asked for a meeting asked if I could see Pradeep Shah.
Really?
And to my astonishment, within about 5 minutes, the door opened and there was this dynamic person standing at the door, sticking out his hand and saying, hi, I'm Pradeep. And that was Pradeep Shah. So he took me to his office, had a chat with me. I explained to him my background, what I had done. He listened patiently and he said, so why are you here? And I said, I'm looking for a job in Bangalore, and I was wondering whether you would be interested in someone like me. And he said, yes, we would be interested. And I was thrilled to hear him say that, and I naively thought I'd actually got the job. So when I got up to go, I asked him, so what
When do I
happens
come?
next? No, what happens next? And he said, don't you think a CV would be a good idea? And so then I went and sent my CV, and that's how I landed up in a job, landed up in CRISIL. And it was completely serendipitous, and
Truly.
turned out to be such a rewarding and such an amazing 23 years after that.
So you went back and you had to do a CV for him. And then how did you reach back? Like you had to email it to him or go back, meet him and give it to him?
I can't even remember whether there was email those days.
Yeah.
There probably wasn't. I'm thinking, no, there wasn't. I think I went and handed it over to the office. And then a few other people met with me. But it all happened fairly quickly after that.
Do you believe in destiny?
That's a great question. No one's ever asked me that. And I think, I don't know whether I'd use the word destiny, but I do think that luck has a lot to do with everything, in the sense that, of course, you have to work hard. Of course, you have to be reasonably smart. But I think success and where and the breaks that you get in life are very often about being in the right place at the right time. And I think too many of us give ourselves far too much credit. There's a lot that has to do with factors which, like I said at the beginning of our chat today, that I belong to a generation that benefited from the opening up of the Indian economy, and I think the trajectory that we saw was something which no one could have imagined in our careers. So I do think that luck, or maybe destiny is another word for it, does have a very big role to play.
I would decode it, and for a lot of our audience is also from the corporate world, mid to senior level managers. We have CXOs who watch it, and I keep getting there, whenever there is some conversation which is out, I get a lot of, input from them. So I would decode what you just told me in a way that had you not been reading newspapers every day, how would you even read this article? So people who are looking for things, I think destiny would come into play when the destiny would see that you are also not always working hard, but looking forward to something to happen and doing something. You're putting something on the table, which is also your input. So reading the newspaper and...
I think it's more than just putting something. I think certain things are a given. You really have to work very hard. You have to be intentional.
Yeah.
You have to be well informed. You have to keep relearning and reinventing yourself today, which was less of an issue when we began our careers, if I'm quite honest. It's much more of an imperative today. You have to build your networks.
Right.
You have to put yourselves consciously in places which may not be your comfort zone. So there has to be
Let's talk about this.
We should. There has to be an intentionality that you bring to your work and your career, if it's a career conversation that we are having. That is a must. But when I talked about luck, it's over and above all of this. Even after doing all of this, luck plays a very big role.
True.
I would not want what I said to be misinterpreted as saying, oh, it's all luck anyway, so we don't have to do very much. Far from the case. I think you need to have, especially at the early stages of your career, you need to build domain knowledge. You need to build capabilities to work with others. You need to learn empathy of a different kind that may not have learned during your student days, for example. So you need to do all of that. That is table stakes, I think, and there is no getting away from. There's no getting away from that.
I think you made a very important point here. This is almost like a little masterclass on career, which is going to be very important. So when you say that initial part of your career, domain, somebody who's just, let's begin understanding who is an analyst. Like, what is the role of an analyst? And then if you can please help decode that from an analyst to when you started going up the ranks with your own experience, what is it that you had to do deliberately? Because most of the people, the moment they're out of colleges and they are in a job, then they feel that we have done it. Now we are in a job. Now the job should keep giving us the appraisals and the progress that we want. And when the job is not able to do that, then they are not able to comprehend or dissect this information. And they are always in a dilemma that somebody else is getting the promotion and I am not. What is lacking in me? So that definition from you would be wonderful for everyone to know.
Yeah, you, Poonam, touched upon, I think, a very vital topic, which is that the transition from mid-management to senior management is the hardest transition that you can ever have to make in your career. And before that, as we all said, you go to a good institute, you graduate, you get into a reasonably good job, you learn your domain, whatever it is. You could be an analyst, you could be in marketing, whatever area you are in. You pick up the fundamentals of your job, and all of that. You may also find that you've got good appraisals every year. You know your domain really well. You know how to manage your team really well. You know how to manage your customer very well. So you think life is good.
Yeah.
I'm all set. And then you find that your career is plateauing.
Yeah.
And why is that? So I come back to the fact that this transition is extremely difficult to make, because what got you up to mid-management is not what is going to take you up to senior management. What takes you from mid to senior management is a completely new set of skills, where technical expertise and all of that is important, but not that important, especially if you're talking about roles at the very top. The first big shift that one has to make is changing your lens. From what someone once explained to me, from a worm's eye view to a bird's eye view. So as long as you're up to mid-management, your whole world is you and your team and your customer. I'm just simplifying it a bit. But the moment you have to shift your lens from bottom up to top down, all of a sudden you have to view the whole landscape. You have to understand how the different pieces of the organization and even the sector or even the wider market beyond fit in. You have to understand the interconnections. You have to understand what you do in one part, how it affects what happens in another part. You have to anticipate what other stakeholders will do, whether it be regulators or whether it be competitors. So the level at which you're thinking has to shift. So that's not an easy transition to make. The second thing that happens, which is very different, is that the stakeholders themselves change. You find that you will have to deal with your peers, you have to deal with board members, with the media, with regulators. All these people are people you have to influence without having any authority over them. So how do you influence without having that authority, which you have with your team currently, but you may not have with them? That is, again, a completely new skill set. So I think that these two things make this transition from mid to senior management a difficult transition. Also bear in mind that as you move higher and higher up the ladder, you're also dealing with the pyramid, which means there are fewer and fewer roles and only so many people can get there, right? So I think it's fallacious to think that I've done so well, I've got great appraisals, and therefore I must be able to move ahead. I think, again, it's a necessary condition for moving ahead. It's not a sufficient condition.
How nicely you have put. This is like opening the whole box of ideas and thinking and innovation here. This is going to really help a lot of people. Roopa, please help us understand what is this skill set. Now, I too get a lot of questions on this from mid to top. So as you said, skill set is required. Could you help us understand and decode further? For example, in your experience, if there is case in point, any that you knew that two of them are equally good, how would one person progress ahead? And if that two of them are really good, how they have to think at that time? And when is the time when somebody has to think that in this organization, in this setup, maybe I will not be able to get that push, and possibly I need to look outside, or if I have to continue and I really love the organization, I love everything. Like I'm speaking from, it's a little complicated question. Even I'm trying to layer it up in a way that you and I both can possibly understand, and our viewers also. You have spent good 23 years. Now that commitment level is very different. In today's time, every 4 years, people are thinking that I am not getting a promotion, I need to jump out. When they jump out, it is a complete different territory altogether. You have to start afresh. Most of the people don't understand. How would you give a learning to the corporate world who is going to be watching this? How they have to think?
Let me share a little bit of my own experience.
Please.
And also what I've seen in terms of people who make this transition successfully. Up to a certain point in my career, I would say I was not very ambitious. I love my work. I love my colleagues. I thoroughly enjoyed myself every single day. I didn't really think too much about where am I headed and, where is this all going to take me and what do I want to do 5 years down the line. For the first 15, 16 years of my career, that was not even a consideration. And then little by little, when I look back now, I realized that things started happening. And I started hearing conversations about what is the larger purpose of our organization. There were conversations about, hey, we exist to make markets function better. And just hearing, participating in those conversations, I noticed a change within myself in the sense that it gave me a greater sense of purpose. It enhanced my pride. It made me feel 2 inches taller. And without knowing it, that at that point in time, when I look back with the benefit of hindsight, I understand now that it helped me develop a better sense of purpose and why I do what I do. And the reason I do what I do beyond the fact that it's about making a livelihood.
Or a KPI or a KRA.
Or a KPI or a KRA. So many people most people who make this transition and people who go all the way up to the top, I think understanding your own purpose is very important. And a simple way of describing purpose is the reason to exist beyond making money. What is the deeper purpose? Why are you really... why are you working, or what do you hope to get out of your career? I think that answers many of the questions in terms of choices of organization. And then you start asking yourself questions, does the organization's mission and vision resonate with me? That doesn't mean to say there needs to be 100% alignment. But I think it needs to check at least a few boxes. You need to feel that there is some synergy between your purpose and the organization's purpose, right? You can also get a sense of purpose from observing other role models.
True.
You can also get a sense of purpose from understanding your privilege. We always tend to compare ourselves with people who are doing better than us. We never look at people who are not doing as well as us, right? But the moment you start focusing and have a deeper appreciation of, I'm here because, yes, I worked hard, but so did many other people. But if each of us recognizes the advantages with which we started off in life, and all of us have some advantages, and if we can use that privilege to really bring others up, whether it be mentoring people in the organization, whether it be supporting SMEs, whatever it may be. So there are many paths, Poonam, to finding purpose. And I would, it does sound, it's not very textbookish what I'm saying here. It doesn't follow any 7 laws of success. But I'm a firm believer in the fact that, if you are aiming high and if you want to reach the very top, you have to have the sense of purpose. And that can make all the difference in the way you see yourself, your approach to work, your philosophy, how you view setbacks, how resilient you become. All of it, I think, is shaped by the purpose that drives you and the purpose that makes you show up every day.
How beautifully you have explained. Who were your role models?
It's a difficult question to answer. I think I picked up little bits from so many different people. I would say some teachers in school. A couple of them were really truly my role models, because I think they really had the power of inspiration. They brought home to me the power of knowledge. I think many people I was fortunate to be in CRISIL because, we got to evaluate so many companies. So all my interactions were with very senior people on the other side, whether it was the CFO or the CEOs, right from the time you're a rating analyst. And that is the best source of learning. In a sense, I was imbibing, it was like drinking from a fire hose of the best talent of the corporate world. And so many people, little things you pick up from so many people. And I think I was really fortunate because I learned a lot from observing others, watching others, remembering what people said. And I think the CRISIL job again, positioned me in a place where I had that exposure.
I want to come in here and ask you, would you help us understand what is a ratings business for people to know?
Sure. It's been more than a decade that I was in the credit rating industry. So, but let me try and explain it in a very simple manner. A rating basically refers to the degree of risk involved in the payment of interest and repayment of principal on the debt of a company. So basically, a credit rating is risk analysis. A credit rating relates to borrowings of a company. It could be bank loans, it could be debentures, and it's assessing, what is the probability of getting your money back, right? It's a little different from being an equity analyst. So if you're a credit analyst, up to a point it's the same, right? You're looking at the fundamentals of the company, you're looking at the market, you're looking at the business, you're looking at the financials, you're looking at the management. But at the end of the day, to put it in a very simple way, the job of the equity analyst is to imagine what could go right and the upside. The job of a debt analyst is to figure out what could go wrong.
So, if, for example, how would Roopa look at a business?
Well, I think
Please decode this for me. Like, how would you look at a business?
Yeah, I think there are. It depends on what kind of a business. If you're looking at a large corporate, there are a different set of things. And later in my career, I was looking at startups. So happy to talk about both. Let's start with the more established corporates, right? I think the first is the business.
Yeah.
And so what's the sector? What's the market? What are the risk factors relating to that particular industry? How is it positioned? Is it a high growth sector? Is it a low growth sector? Is it a sector in decline? What are the competitive dynamics? So these are all the kinds of factors that go into a business risk analysis. Then there is the financial risk analysis, which is the analysis of the profit and loss account and the balance sheet. And then that's textbook stuff, right? And cash flow projections. And this is analysis today and also predicting for what's likely to happen in the future. And the third component of analysis is management and the team. Who are we talking about here? What is the quality of the management in terms of their competence, in terms of their ability to innovate, in terms of their risk appetite and risk management capabilities, in terms of their integrity. So all these are the factors that one looks at under management analysis. When you look at a startup, and particularly an early stage startup, what becomes really important is what is the problem you're trying to solve? And I say you, I mean the entrepreneur, right? And why is this problem important? And then, of course, the business model. What is the solution that the entrepreneur is proposing for the business, for the problem, becomes the next thing. And then I think you're at the end of the day really taking a bet on the entrepreneur, because we've all seen that startups go through a lot of pivots and changes in the business model. But what remains at the end of the day is the passion for the problem that the entrepreneur is trying to solve, and the grit that the entrepreneur has to stay the course in what is a very difficult journey. I also think you are also looking for ability to build a good team. So, does this entrepreneur have it in her or have it in him to be able to attract a high quality team? Does the entrepreneur have the ability to understand what her or his own strengths and weaknesses are? Because you need different kinds of skills for different stages of the entrepreneurial journey. What you require in Series A and Series B up to, say, seed Series A, Series B is very different from what you require Series B plus, right? So does the entrepreneur have the ability to adapt, change, or get on the right people at the right point in time? So it's a big bet on the entrepreneur and the idea and the problem when you're a startup investor. Whereas in a CRISIL type of role, it was much more about you were looking at companies which had a past track record, and therefore the framework of business risk, financial risk, management risk had a different nuance, had different dimensions than it would have in a startup.
Any incidents or, let me put it this way, in your long career, there would be 2 or 3 incidences when your entire team was, yes, this is A+ rating. But you came on board and said, no, this is not. We need to downgrade, or you have to spill the beans on the show.
Yeah, sure.
Without naming any such incidences when your team was everything on the paper, because that's where the instinct of a leader comes into play.
Yes. Let me talk about a very interesting situation, which I think offers many lessons to listeners on your show as well. It was a big influence on me and how I thought about our business and thought about what it takes to build a successful business, right? So as you know, after liberalization, the economy opened up. And many Indian companies were, for the first time, exposed to global competition. Many sectors were challenged, many companies were challenged. And one of those sectors was the NBFC sector. And it was going through a very difficult time. And till then, the Indian market had not seen any downgrades.
Yeah.
When we looked at those companies, we realized that we would have to downgrade many companies in our portfolio. I remember having extremely difficult conversations with the CEOs of these companies, many of whom took it personally because they had never seen something like this before. And CRISIL at that point in time took a decision and announced a decision one day involving downgrades of 18 NBFCs at one point in time. And it made headlines. The Indian market had never seen anything like that before. And that set off a flood of downgrades. Meanwhile, there are other rating agencies that had come up. And so many of the downgraded companies went and got a second rating from another rating agency,
Correct.
Probably a better rating at times, right? Because they were very upset. And at that time, I remember us having a discussion with our board saying, what happens if all these companies go away? What happens to our revenues? And our board at that point said, don't worry about this. Just focus on doing what is right. You guys go ahead, do what needs to be done. Don't worry about what happens to the business. We'll see, we'll see what happens later. Our share price took a huge knock at that point in time. And then what happened was, because the problems were real, these companies faced downgrades from other rating agencies as well. And over time, we were able to convince investors about the rationale behind our thinking. And slowly, again, we built up the market share and the revenues, and the stock price zoomed and soared and indeed went to unprecedented heights for many, many years after that. But that was a difficult moment, but I think the board gave us courage to do the right thing, no matter what the outcome or the impact on the business. And that is a lesson, a life lesson and a career lesson, which I will never forget. Very important and very vital.
True. I want you to go back and think of those 18 founders or CEOs at that time, or maybe promoters, because we are talking about NBFCs, right? India still is led by promoters in many sectors. As a woman, what were your feelings? Because you were front-ending all men. I don't think all these 18 NBFCs, did you have any women?
Come to think of it, no.
Yes. So,
Not that I can offhand remember at all.
though I don't know the names and we don't want to take out the names, but I'm presuming that these 18 would not have a woman leader. Was it difficult for you to think? Were you able to sleep peacefully in the night? Did you think that it could impact your growth or progress had it not been for the management to be supportive? Do you get those, sensitive emotional pangs where you feel, I don't know, if I am not being perceived as people's person, being a woman leader, I may have it in a different way, or maybe the tides would turn against me. Did these questions or scenarios cross your mind, or you were just confident?
Fortunately, I think the environment and culture that existed in CRISIL, which was created by the two CEOs before me, and bear in mind at the point in time I'm talking about, I was not the CEO of the company at that point, right? So, but the culture was such that I never even once had to think about the fact that I was a woman. It never, I think the environment, I'd never felt I was disadvantaged in any way because I was a woman. In some ways, Poonam, I think because of the society, the matrilineal society and the environment I grew up in, I didn't even, now when I look back, I was a bit naive, not even to realize probably that these were issues. I realize that much better today. And probably that helped me.
Yes.
Because,
confidence is different.
Correct. So I think that, but that was a bit of a digression. But coming back to this, I feel that you asked me, did I stay up at night? I think a lot of us, because it was such a unprecedented thing and it was happening for the first time, and the companies were very upset. I remember we used to get calls, and those days they were only landlines at all hours of the day. I remember getting one call at midnight, and that was when the mobile phones had just come in. I remember getting one call at midnight from a founder saying that, you guys are going to ruin us. And I think the good thing was that we were all very well trained right from the beginning. I think right from the time of Pradeep Shah and Ravi Mohan, we were all taught that, look, you guys are going to be dealing with people on the other side of the table who are veterans. Yeah. They have been in the sector for 20, 30 years. Whereas people like you have been working for maybe 4, 5, 6 years. And so rule number one, humility. So, and always remember that when you're rating a company, people feel like they're being judged.
Correct.
So that sets the tone for a relationship, which is in any case edgy. And therefore, it becomes all the more important for you to be humble.
Correct.
So that was taught. Never make anything personal.
रुकावट के लिए खेद है. अगर आपको हमारा कंटेंट और कॉन्वर्सेशंस अच्छे लग रहे हैं तो प्लीज लाइक, सब्सक्राइब एंड शेयर करिए अपने फैमिली मेंबर्स और फ्रेंड्स के साथ. Thank you so much for watching.
I think, Roopa, this is very interesting when you said that you were trained to go to their office and not invite them. How does it make a difference, and what is the thought behind this?
I think two things. Number one is, of course, one is the courtesy and the respect. They are people who are very senior, veterans, experienced.
And clients.
And clients as well. Although, to be honest, we thought more of investors as being our clients, not so much as the company we were evaluating, because the primary users of ratings are the investors. You're basically, it's an interesting business model where you evaluate the company and you're paid by the company, but your client consumer is, it's something like an auditor, right? Similar situation. But to come back to what I was saying about some of the procedures and practices, which I think were best practices and really build the culture and set the standards. One was humility. I think, two was framing questions in a manner and handling the discussion in a manner that didn't feel personal. And this whole practice of going to people's office had two benefits. One was showing them the regard and the respect. And two, even more important, it gave us a sense as analysts of the environment, the culture of the company, and how these organizations operate. The other practice we always had was nobody went alone for a meeting. You always went in a minimum groups of 2. for two reasons. One is that you prepare well, and you understand, you have a game plan for the meeting, who's going to handle what part of the conversation, and it also allows someone to step in when required, the other person to step in and just keep the discussion on track. It also helps maintain, these are all often sensitive conversations. It also leaves no scope for misinterpretation, because if there's only one person handling the meeting, you don't know what happens in the meeting. So I think it is important to maintain the integrity of the conversation. So I think these are some of the things that were really important. The other practice that was really important was that no one person could determine the rating. The rating was always assigned by the rating committee. The rating committee had a good mix of people who interacted with the organization being rated, but there were also some people who never interacted with the organization.
Oh, really?
And that was by design, to maintain, to have
Fair
that
view.
perspective that comes with with distance.
Correct.
When everyone was trained to be fair, and so fairness was a deep seated cultural value.
DNA.
But I think the construct where you have some people who are a few steps removed, because again, I think a little bit of distance also improves the perspective. When you're too close to a situation, sometimes you may not have the same perspective. So these are some of the simple things that were done, but which had a really profound impact on culture. The other thing I would say is that no hierarchy culture, which was so refreshing at that time in India, because unheard of at that point in time. So what mattered more was the power of your idea, or the power of your analysis, more than who you were in the hierarchy. And that was a culture that was very effectively built, I must say. Very unusual for those times. I came from an organization, a public sector organization, which was more typical of the time, because you did the appraisal, the file went up.
Yeah.
You really were not present in the room when the decision was made. Whereas CRISIL, the rating committees were conducted in a manner that anyone who was an employee of the company could enter the room and listen to the proceedings, which is so powerful.
Is wonderful.
It was really unique at that point in time.
I had no clue about it.
And that was really a very special aspect of the culture. So today there's a lot of talk about culture in companies, and culture lies in the small things.
Correct.
Culture, these are all examples that I've given you. These little things are all elements that go into building culture.
True. Roopa, let's just reflect back on one question before I move on to that. I think I want a little bit of reflection on that. Any one promoter / founder at that point in time, when you thought that you're losing the conversation, you're not able to convince?
Convince about what?
When you had gone to meet, or any discussion when you thought that I'm losing it, and how did you come out of that situation? Was there anything that you thought that I can do it differently to bring the conversation on my side?
No, I think there were many conversations which were intense. And the nature of the business itself was such, right? Because unless you got the highest rating, people always felt they could they could do better, right? They deserved better. And that was par for the course. So I would say that intense conversations where people were not quite satisfied with the rating were fairly routine, I would say. And therefore, I think we were taught to really explain ratings well, what went into the rating, what was the logic, what was the analysis. And I remember I was so gratified. There was a telecom company which we downgraded once. I know you spent part of your career in telecom, Poonam. But I remember there was a large telecom company which was downgraded once or put on rating watch. I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was a very, very heated discussion that I had with the CFO. And at the end of the conversation, the gentleman was gracious enough to say, I don't like what you've done, but I respect your logic. So, I think, people as time wore on and as people understood the approach, I think they also became more understanding.
And open about embracing it, maybe.
I think so.
I think it's how you also, as you rightly said, that you are explaining it to me, you are being open to me, you're not shutting the doors. I think not shutting the door is also a very big
it's so,
signal.
I think you raised a very important point, and that's not just in a rating context, right? That's in any conversation. It could be in a promotion conversation. It could be in a business deal conversation. Just because something doesn't happen at a point in time doesn't mean that it will never happen.
What a powerful thought that is. Help me understand your first 90 days now as a CEO. We're moving in your life now. How difficult, easy, cakewalk? What was it? I'm sure it was something, because you're one of the women to be, having this huge title on you of a CEO.
Yeah,
which is on meritocracy, which is on based on work.
Yeah, you're talking about something which is 2 decades ago. I would say that for me, moving from the CRO, the Chief Rating Officer, to the CEO role was much easier than moving into the Chief Rating Officer role. And let me tell you why.
Sure.
When I became the Chief Rating Officer, it was a job I asked for. It was a job I raised my hand for. I was working in Paris in Standard & Poor's for a couple of years. And when I came back to India, the Chief Rating Officer of CRISIL had left at that point in time. And I learned that the plan was not to have a replacement. And instead, each of the sector heads, of whom I was one, would report directly to the CEO of the company. And when I heard that, I distinctly remember the first stirrings of some ambition in me. As I told you initially,
Finally.
I was not.
Finally, congratulations.
Thank you. So yes, I remember distinctly feeling that. And so at a company offsite in Goa, I put together a 4-slide presentation titled Why This Company Needs a CRO and Why I Think I'm the Right Person for It. And
this needs a handshake, because most women don't do this.
And
this was presented to
Ravi Mohan, who was the CEO. I kind of buttonholed him for 20 minutes. I said, I need 20 minutes of your time. And I really believe the company needed a chief rating officer. I felt we could do a lot more in terms of taking the ratings business to the next level, in terms of our engagement with investors, in terms of our operations, in terms of our communication, and all of that. And I put down, and when I look at those 4 slides today, by today's standards, they seem horribly amateurish. But be that as it may, I had this conversation with him. He listened very patiently, didn't say a single word. And he said, okay, thank you. And I left the room, and we went back to the offsite. And I didn't hear anything for the next few months. And I thought, oh, well, I tried, and, who knows, maybe nothing's come of it. And a few months later, towards the end of the year, he walked up to my desk and said, can I see you in my office? And when I went into his office, he said to me that, you remember that conversation that you had with me in Goa? We've discussed it at the board level, and we're very happy to make you the CRO of the company. And just like that, it happened. It was so simple. All I had to do was ask. And that transition was difficult for me, because the immediate people I was working with were all my peers. And, they were a bunch of extremely talented people with a lot of heft. And suddenly one day, and each one of them undoubtedly was a better analyst than I was, without a doubt. And when I got this role, my dynamic with them changed completely.
overnight.
And I had to learn how to handle that dynamic and build the trust and get the acceptance. It was a bit of a journey. But it was very different when it came to the CEO role, because by then I think by the time I actually became CEO, it was pretty evident all across the board that I would be the CEO of the company.
Yeah.
It was not said formally, but it was the way my career was moving and my responsibilities were evolving. It didn't come as much as a surprise to anyone as the role transition to CRO did. And so when you ask me about my first 90 days as CEO, it wasn't I don't remember it as being
The new CEO.
Yes, I was conscious of the fact when I became the chief rating officer that I was stepping into very large shoes.
True.
I remember that emotion being very strong. Both Pradeep Shah and Ravi Mohan were towering figures in the Indian financial landscape. Their contributions to building the company, the regard with which they were held, the innovation that they brought, each in their own ways, was truly exceptional.
True.
And I was always feeling that, that it was going to be a very tough act to follow. I was also very clear that there was absolutely no point in trying to be like them, because it was not something I could do. So I was very much my own person. And I, like every CEO is, right? You bring your own qualities, you bring your own perspectives, you bring your own strengths, you also bring your own weaknesses to the role. And I was no different.
Any pitfalls during this journey? Because of course now the core team is now going to be reporting into you. It is a very difficult role. I understand that. Any pitfalls, any learning at that time?
I don't know about learning at that time, but I can talk about my general learning, or I wouldn't use the word pitfall. I will use the word struggle. I think what I've struggled with in my leadership journey is to find the right balance in terms of empowerment. I have been criticized for being too micromanaging. I've also been criticized for being too hands-off. And both those criticisms have been fair at that point in time from the people involved. So I've never quite figured out where does the right balance between these two lies. And I would say that that has been a shortcoming as far as my own leadership journey has been concerned. I've tried to get better at it, but hand on heart, I will still say I haven't quite figured it out.
But you are the captain of the ship and you have to take the ship ahead.
Indeed, you have to.
I will come in here and tell you that all these things would look like leadership when there is a man leading it, and the moment a woman comes in the picture, then these are the what should we call it? Feedback, but we don't care about it. Leading women would not care for such feedback and move ahead, is what I believe.
Well, I wouldn't say I don't care about the feedback, but let's come back to this point in a bit. I want to touch upon the other point that you said, that had it been a man, it would have been different. You know, a little while ago in this conversation, Poonam, we talked about why is it so difficult to go from middle management to senior management, right? Now, I would say in addition to the points that I mentioned earlier, there are additional factors when it comes to women. And you touched upon one of them. So women face those issues, the bottom up to top down view, the managing multiple stakeholders, but they also face 3 or 4 other issues. And let's talk about them. The first one is what you referred to, that is the likability factor. Research has consistently shown that successful women leaders are less liked than successful male leaders. And the reason for that is that if you just peel the onion a little bit, the qualities such as assertiveness, being authoritative, demanding accountability, don't fit in with your traditional image that has been seeped into our subconscious over millennia and generations, that the role of a woman is to be soft and nurturing.
Yes.
So these seem to be in contradiction to each other. So the likability is a factor. Secondly, I think there is the question of self-belief in women themselves.
True.
It possibly comes from conditioning, but also the likability factor. And again, research has shown that if there are... so women just have a hard time coming to terms with the belief that I am fit or cut out for the top jobs.
True.
So if a woman sees a job announcement and sees that out of the 10 requirements, she is not meeting 4 of them, she will not apply.
Yeah.
Whereas the man will say, hey, I'm meeting 6 of the requirements, let me apply. So that again is I think the second factor. The third, I think, is self-advocacy. I think when I say advocacy, I mean asking for the jobs. I gave you my example, my story just now. Sometimes it's as simple as just asking.
Correct.
It's not as complicated. But women hold back. I remember I was having a conversation with a colleague recently, and she had just come to me for some brainstorming about her career, etc. And I suggested a particular role to her, which I knew was available. And she said, I said, you must apply for this job. And she said it had never occurred to her that she would be a fit for that role. And she would never, had that conversation not happened at that point in time, she would not even have applied for that job. So this self-advocacy is definitely a challenge. I think, solving this doesn't mean you have to fix women. It doesn't mean you have to fix men.
Yeah.
It just means that both women leaders as well as male leaders have to do much more. For me, it has been a journey. If you had asked me 20, 25 years ago, I would have brushed all of this aside. I would have said it's all about merit. Of course, it's all about merit. But actively sponsoring women for the top jobs, I believe, is a process of uncovering where the merit lies.
True.
It is positioning yourself to deepen your talent pool and to broaden your talent pool. It's not anti-merit. And so I think as women leaders, we owe it to other women to lend a helping hand. I think men owe it to women in the organization to be active sponsors, to spend time understanding what these barriers are. And if you're a marketing person, if you look at customer segments, you will look at it segment by segment to see what you need to do to reach that particular segment or attract that particular segment. Think of your employees the same way. The women have a certain set of barriers that they are facing, which we just talked about. How do we address them? How do we address the unconscious biases that shape attitudes? How do we address the entrenched systems that have crept in over time, not because of ill intent, but that's just the way we've been conditioned. And so how do we tackle it? So I think women have a role to play. Men have a role to play, and organizations have a role to play. This is not about fixing anyone. It's about collectively solving the problems so that we can discover more merit. It's not anti-merit.
How well put by you. This is a collective effort of not just, as you rightly said, male or female or the organization, but the whole system has to come together and say we are going to be embracing. And that is also a very large part of returning women. Do you have any view on how organizations should be looking at returning women without having the bias of now she has a break?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of organizations which are actively encouraging this to happen. I also think, frankly, post-COVID, things have become easier in a sense because practices like remote working from home are better entrenched. These things help keep women in the workforce.
Right.
So I think all of that is a positive. I think, I think wearing purely a business hat, you have invested so much in that woman, bringing her up to middle management stage or wherever she's reached in her journey. Yes, she might want to take a little bit of a break now because she's having a baby. But why would you want to write off all that investment? Doesn't it make sense to get her back?
Wow, thank you for saying this. I think this makes so much of sense. Roopa, we have successfully now moved to a section which is a very favorite section of everyone. This is called as viewers' choice questions. Now, why do we have this section? So there are, not everyone is able to get a mentor, and not everyone has the access. For example, I am fortunate to be sitting with you and asking you and having the pleasure of asking you all these questions. How many women can just, maybe, but I want to say it on the camera that you are very much active on LinkedIn, and if you have questions, then women and people and all leaders possibly could have an access to you also today.
Sure.
But me and my teams went on to little bit research on the questions which are glaring questions that people usually have in their mind, and we don't just put in our segment called viewers choice questions these questions straight to you. We kind of, let's say, massage it a little bit in terms of when you answer these questions, how it will impact people.
So
who
this
are
is
going
not
to be...
a rapid fire round.
No. This is not rapid fire. You can take your time and answer as peacefully as you would like.
That's helpful.
Yeah, this is not a rapid fire, Roopa. But then are you ready to answer some hard-hitting questions that people are searching all over the internet?
Yes, hopefully I am. Let's see how it goes.
Sure. In this segment, my first question to you would be, which is a widely researched question: what separates good CEOs from unforgettable ones, and what advice would you give to first-time founders?
I think an unforgettable CEO has exceptional clarity of purpose. They are able to drive sharp execution, and they understand that their key role is to be an enabler and not necessarily to have answers to all these questions. Good leaders deliver results, but great leaders can really build an institution. They can build culture, they can build strategic alignment, they create the conditions for good execution. All of that, I think, differentiates a great leader from a good leader. Where a founder is concerned, I would say, rather than trying to be perfect or rather than aiming for perfection, aim for clarity. As we discussed earlier, figure out what is the problem that you're trying to solve and be very clear about that. Always stay close to your customer and always focus on execution. I think that's an underrated quality in startups today. And because a lot of the conversation is about business models. But good execution is all about being very clear about what the expectations are, what has to happen by when,
Correct.
who does what. You'd be surprised to know that that's not often very clear, and then putting in place rituals. This is not about having fancy tech tools. It's about putting in place the rituals to say, we will have this cadence of meetings. We will have an honest discussion on what progress we are making and how we will keep correcting, There's so much discussion on startup business models, but I have now looked at hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneur pitches. And let me tell you this, there are very few really unique business models. And even the ones that are unique rarely stay unique over the long term. And so therefore the differentiator is execution. There's this famous quote by Derek Sivers which says that ideas are just the multiplier of execution.
Very well said. Thank you for giving this lens on the whole system. The next question is very interesting. In your entire career, was there a bold move you wanted to make but couldn't? And do you wish you had?
I think there was a major acquisition which I could perhaps have pushed more strongly on. So we were evaluating, we had worked very hard on a major, what could have been a game-changing acquisition. And we were nearly in the last few steps of the process. At that point in time, we got some input from some of the board members. These board members were new and had just come onto the board because of changes at the shareholder level.
Right.
And they felt that they needed time to understand our company, the business, the environment, the market. And they said, we therefore suggest that we do not go ahead with this acquisition at this point. At that point, I was the CEO and I readily agreed. I readily agreed because this was a major shareholder. It was an important relationship. And I thought of the long term and the importance of keeping stakeholders aligned for the long term. Probably on balance, I did it was the right call. But I do look back and wonder if that was something I should have pushed harder on because I had deep conviction about it. But finally, in my mind, it was a trade-off between
Balancing.
Conviction and stakeholder alignment.
Thank you for mentioning this. How do you personally define failure, and what's one failure that changed your leadership?
There are very few things that I view as failures, actually. Most people, would call a setback a failure. But I think of setbacks as the outcome of things which are not in your control. Markets may change, the customer may change, something may happen to somebody outside your team or immediate control. So that's a setback. Or it may be a situation, most people think of situations where they don't get what they want as a failure. But, I think of both these situations as life. All of us will always face setbacks in life. Nobody will get everything that they want.
True.
And so I think it's sometimes good to take a step back and keep this perspective. There's a lot of focus on failures. I rose, I fought back, etc., etc. But to me, it's basically life. This happens to everybody. In terms of my own failures or shortcomings, I would go back to what we discussed earlier. I think this whole struggle between micromanagement and being hands-off has been a genuine struggle for me, and I would call it a failure.
Will not call it a failure. As you just grown me and everyone watching this to say failures are not real. They are just a part of the journey. So I'll take that learning from you today. Many professionals tie their self-worth to their job title. You have said this a number of times, that a job is not your identity. How can we truly live that? It's very difficult.
Yeah, so I think the trick is to build a life which has many sources of meaning. And your identity should not be a hostage to any one of these sources of identity.
Wow.
So, so I think that, look, at the outset, I want to say that it's very natural for your job to become your identity, particularly if you enjoy your work, you're doing well, you have a high profile job. It is understandable how your identity and your job title get intrinsically mixed. But I think the challenges happen when it begins to define your self-worth. When you define your self-worth by a business win, when you define your self-worth by a promotion, and then you're on this huge emotional roller coaster where every success puts you in a euphoric high and any dip makes you feel at a personal low.
Correct.
And so the trick, therefore, is to broaden your life, to create the space for other things that give meaning. It could be a hobby, it could be a passion, it could be relationships.
Correct.
It's a combination of all of these that leads to a more balanced life, and therefore, a less of a dangerous connection between your identity and your job. It also helps, I think, to ask yourself. A wise woman once told me, ask yourself the question, who am I without my job? And that will really help you understand what are your values, what you really enjoy. And I find people who are able to do this better, they are more grounded, they are more resilient,
Right.
and they don't lose their sense of self. Which happens if you're on this emotional roller coaster that I described just now.
True. Very well explained. Thank you so much for giving this lens. This is the viral question on the internet, which I am getting on to. India saw over 1 lakh tech layoffs in the last 12 months. Unfortunately, fortunately, you will have to decode for us, with tech giants on an unstoppable layoff mode on right now. What would you tell both the leaders and the laid off employees, especially in the mid-career professionals who feel invisible now? And my follow-up to this is, And the ones who are fortunate to have the job, they don't want to listen to Narayan Murthis of the world and want work-life balance. What's your view?
So let's take it step by step. Let's start with the leaders
Right.
of these organizations, right? I think the first thing to understand is that we are not dealing with a financial challenge here. We are dealing with a human challenge. Layoffs are a human challenge. They are not a solution to a financial problem. And so therefore we need to treat it as such. It means that you have to approach it firstly with transparency. You need to be absolutely upfront about the reasons for the layoff. People, even though it's hard news and difficult news, people want to know the real reasons. So I think sharing that becomes important. Helping people land on their feet is important, whether it be through money, whether it be through outplacements, whether it be through references. And also, Poonam, I think the tone of the communication, because I think the biggest problem people have is with things like a mass severance mail coming out.
True.
So how you handle that communication will be remembered for a long time. And you as a leader will be remembered for how you handle that communication, right? So I think that's as far as the leaders are concerned. As far as the mid-level managers are concerned, this is an extremely difficult situation and it's very upsetting. But I think it's important to remember that it's not your fault. This has happened. It's not your fault. The job market is brutal. There is no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean your skills are not valuable. It doesn't mean that you're too old. It doesn't mean that you're too overpriced, because that's the first thing you default to.
Correct.
So it doesn't mean that. It's not easy. No one's saying it's easy. But I think there are a couple of things. One is look to your networks. Your networks are going to be very important at this point in time in helping you land on your feet, much more than a perfect job application.
Correct.
People immediately focus on, I've got to make a CV and polishing it and all of that. But I would say leverage your networks. Now is the time. You've invested in the networks, building the networks, now leverage them. I think that part of it becomes important. And secondly, look at it also as an opportunity to step back and see what you really want to do. We talked about that mid-career. We talked about this is the time to make the change, So what do you really want to do? So, who knows? It may be a turning point in your life, right? Right now it feels awful and understandably so. But you never know where this is going to go.
The whole fiasco around the 70-hour work week and 90-hour work week. So one side, people are losing their jobs and their careers in the interim till they do some kind of skill set building, or as you rightly said, you have to reset the whole thing again to tune yourself into the world which is going to appear in the time to come. And the other angle to it is the people who are right now being fortunate, let's say, enough to be holding their fort high and having a good career. Their intention of the work-life balance. So what is your view on this ever going on debate all the time?
Yeah, I think, look, on work-life balance, I think the narrative around work-life balance has evolved in a manner that both are seen as almost opposing forces. It's like you have work and then you have a life. And the two are, one is desirable and one is, the undertone or the implication is one is not so desirable, which is that the life is desirable, the work is not so desirable, right? So that is the unsaid in this discussion about work-life balance. But I think of it as slightly differently. Firstly, I think work is a very important part of having a fulfilling life.
True.
And so I think work and life are not two separate things. Work is an integral part of life. Your life outside of work is also an integral part of life. So I think a healthier way to look at all of this is work-life integration rather than work-life balance. There will be times in your life when work takes a front seat.
Right.
There will be times in your life when other things take a front seat. Right? And both are perfectly okay. In the course of a 30, 40-year-old career, you can't have a perfect balance every single day. The idea is to have on an overall basis to make sure that you're leading your life in a manner where you feel you're doing justice to all aspects of life. But when there is a deadline, of course you will have to meet it. When your child is sick, of course you will have to take her to hospital.
Correct.
So, I think thinking of the two in silos itself is problematic, because I think it undermines work in a manner that it should not be, and in a manner which all these people actually don't. I think they would be miserable if they didn't work.
Correct.
Right? So I think work-life integration is important, and the language around this, I think, is important. Not to position them as opposing forces. Yet at the same time, I think as companies, we also need to understand times have changed. The work environment has changed. The tools available for people to be more productive are much higher than they were in our times. So I think everyone has to change with the changing times, and the expectations of the workforce are also a factor, right? But no one is suggesting we shouldn't. We talked about it earlier in the conversation. Everyone, if you really want to do well, if you really want to succeed as a business, there are no shortcuts.
Very well said. According to McKinsey, up to 30% of hours worked globally could be automated by 2030 due to AI. In this conversation, I just wanted to have a very up and close conversation with you, your life, your career. So we did not touch base on your next expertise, which is AI. But then this is a small question on that. What's one urgent mindset shift both leaders and employees need to make right now to stay relevant?
I think it's about more than fearing AI. I think the way to think about it is, how can we partner with AI, and how can we focus on the skills that AI can never have? And let me talk about that. So there is no doubt at the outset that AI is going to dramatically change industries, whether it is finance, whether it is healthcare, whether it is creative industries. They're going to see a massive change. Secondly, I think the org structures themselves are going to change dramatically.
True.
As AI can do more data crunching, as it can do more analysis, with agentic AI, more decision making, you are going to see decision making get far more decentralized than it's happening today. You will see that we don't need as many layers in an organization as we used to in the past. So that delayering, etc., is definitely, I think going to happen. So the question then becomes, what do leaders do, and what do leaders focus on? I think leaders will have to do three things. First of all, they will have to become AI strategists. Secondly, they will have to become societal influencers. And I will come back to what this means. And thirdly, I think they will have to become ethical guardians. And let me spend a minute on each of these, because I think this is quite interesting and fascinating. When I say AI strategists, I think leaders will have to decide where to use AI in the first place, how to view the output of AI, what to disregard, what to take into account, what to override. What are how to manage the new risks that AI is creating, how to reskill employees and the team in the light of the new requirements that AI is presenting. So all these go into becoming an AI strategist. What does it mean to be a societal influencer?
Societal influencer.
And
very interesting.
Yeah. I think what AI is doing is, there is no doubt that AI is going to change society in very significant ways. And companies, I think, will have to be thoughtful in terms of how they respond to it. And leaders will have to lead the way. I don't know what's going to happen. It's hard to predict. But I think that's important. The third is being an ethical guardian. So, how to focus on privacy of data, how to focus on transparency, how to focus on algorithmic bias. I think these are very important ethical questions that AI is raising, and leaders will have to therefore focus on that. But I think the good thing about all of this to remember is that there are some things that AI can never replicate, like moral judgment is one. navigating complex stakeholders. I talked about the stakeholder alignment issue.
Can't be same for everyone.
It can't be the same. So I think, and it requires empathy is a third. So I think these are the skills that are going to become more important. And at the end of the day, Poonam, I think we have to remember that any major technological change through humanity, whether it be electricity, motor car, telephone, television, computers when they came in the first place, all of them brought with them awe and fear.
True.
And it's no different with AI. But humans have an incredible ability to adapt. And I'm hoping we'll be able to do it again.
So very well put. You've served on the boards of Infosys, Nestle, Tata, AIA. What's one quality you always valued in top leadership teams? And what was one red flag for you? Without naming anything. We are just going general.
Right. So I've been very fortunate. I have been the CEO of a listed company.
Yeah.
And I've also sat on the boards of many listed companies. So I've seen the issue from both sides.
Yeah.
And I will say what I really value as a board member, what I really value in a leadership team is if they view the board as a thought partner,
right,
and not merely as someone who is sitting in judgment on them or monitoring them. And if you really view the board as a thought partner, you make the space for a real discussion to happen and not just fill up the time with a one-sided communication with well-prepared presentation. So you have a dialogue, really. I think the red flag is really defensiveness in a management team. And I can empathize with that because even I've got feedback in my early days as CEO that, Roopa, why do you jump in to respond to everything that is said? Every comment made by somebody, you don't have to defend yourself, right? Yeah. So I think it's a natural tendency that happens. But I think, so if one kind of views the board as someone who can help you succeed in your journey rather than someone who's out to monitor you, as I said, alone, I think that's really helpful. But I think defensiveness beyond a point becomes a red flag because what does it tell you? It tells you that the team is not open to feedback. Right. They are hesitant to have a real conversation. And in, heaven forbid it happens, but it could even be lead to a situation where you're getting filtered information.
True.
So I think therefore it's a red flag.
Very well pointed out by you. Just last two questions. A 2024 survey by LinkedIn showed that 60% of Indian men believe taking paternity leave could harm their career. You have written about this extensively. Why is this belief dangerous for gender equity?
I think because when men do not take their paternity leave, it is women who pay the price, both professionally as well as personally. Because the problem is not that many organizations don't have a paternity leave policy. Today, many organizations have it. The problem is that most men don't end up taking their full paternity leave because even though the policy exists, taking that leave is somehow seen as a stigma. It is somehow perceived, or men fear that it is perceived as not being serious about your work.
Focus is going somewhere else.
And why is that problematic? Because it is reinforcing certain beliefs. It is reinforcing the belief that the job of looking after, being a caregiver to a child is the mother's. It is implying that caregiving is a lesser role. It is implying that if you're caring towards your family, you cannot be ambitious.
Correct.
So all these things actually have the effect of keeping women out of the workforce. And India cannot hope to become a developed country unless we increase the participation of women in the labor force in India. And if we want gender equity at the leadership level in companies, we need to have the gender equity at home first. And by men not taking that paternity leave, you don't have that. It prevents that from happening.
Very well put by you. Thank you for giving this lens to this question. This also makes me think that though we are talking about the women in the workforce as such, but even at the CXO level, we are far behind. Though we may say that India is a large country, largest population, high home to the youngsters in the entire world. The average median age we are talking about is 29. 48.5 some percentage is only women population in our country. But having said that, at that level, the senior level, we are far behind. I mean, the West, if you look at, is more than 31% of women sitting in the leadership position. So I think these are what you just made a mark on. All these points, when looked at from the lens of how it is panning out in the corporate world, will make orgs understand that something needs to be done about it.
I think, Poonam, you presented
it's a collective responsibility.
Yeah, I think you presented very compelling statistics, and compliments to you for doing so. But I think the numbers tell their own story, don't they?
Yes. What's one common misconception people had about you as a CEO? I think you mentioned that. We are calling it a misconception. And how did you deal with it without losing your clarity or voice?
Well, I think, because I have spent my entire career in different avatars, more or less in the financial sector, people assume that I have a deep passion for finance, for investing, for markets, but that's not true. I think what I actually have a deep passion for is building something, creating that differentiation, and leaving something lasting. Which is why, when I was in, so it's not so much about finance, it's not so much about investing, it's not so much about markets, it's more about building something that is unique and differentiated. So which is why when in CRISIL, for example, we focused on diversifying the business beyond ratings. Ratings itself was expanded to SME ratings. In Omidyar Network India, for example, we refocused our entire investment strategy around India's next 500 million population. And so really it's been a focus on strategy, it's been a focus on talent, it's been a focus on new areas, and also a lot of emphasis on things like being clear about communication. And finally, my favorite topic, it's about igniting purpose. So I think the misconception is that, this passionate about finance and markets and all of that. I mean, it's there, but that's not what really drives me.
I think the podcast should do the job of clearing this little bit for people who are going to watch you. We have come to the last question, and this is my favorite question now. What's next for India from the lens of Roopa?
Well, I don't know about from the lens of Roopa, but, I feel that we have made amazing strides in this country on inclusion in the last decade in many ways. And I think it's a journey, the journey of inclusion has to continue. And I think there are a few areas where one needs to watch with great interest to see what happens. Let's talk about financial inclusion. We are in this amazing position now of everyone having a bank account. The next stage is in inclusion is moving from financial access to financial health of everyone. How do we make sure the lives of the lower income people, the financial lives are incredibly complex. How do we make sure they have access to insurance, savings, investments, the entire, and are able to lead healthy financial lives?
Right.
That's the next thing in inclusion. I think in education, we've gone from access to education, from enrollment now to focus on learning outcomes and new skills required for the AI age. That's the next path of inclusion. While we are a very young country, as you said, Poonam, we are also aging.
Yeah.
Very soon we will have a senior population which is larger than the population of the United States. And so how do you build an inclusive economy and a country that's inclusive of them? So I think I am very passionate about inclusion, and I think there are many, the journey ahead is going to be very different from the fantastic journey we've had so far. It's going to present new challenges. It's going to present new opportunities, and particularly for new people, young people today and young entrepreneurs, solving for some of these problems and building a more inclusive country, I think is, what better challenge could one ask for?
Very rightly said. This sets the stage up for, as you said, that these are different segments to be looked at from business point of view also and from growth point of view also. Sets the stage up for, I think the buzzword would be growth. And for me to conclude this very beautiful conversation, clarity of purpose. First is purpose from your lens, clarity, communication. These are the three things that just stood out for me. And then just doing it. I think what I am kind of concluding right now in everything that you said is, in Roopa's world, you go with clarity and execute. Am I right? Have I concluded it in a...
Thank you for putting it so succinctly and so clearly. I think you've done it really well. I must say I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Poonam. I so greatly appreciate everything that you do, and it's been a wonderful experience today.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on this show. Thank you, Roopa.
Thank you, Poonam.
Thank you for your time.